done that. I thank you very much for that. There are a couple of things I'd like to say is, when I refer to the paradigm of abundance, I'm not talking about a paradigm of excess. When we think of spiritual values, this lady over here is talking about spiritual values, okay? Spiritual values are something about living a life of abundance. But abundance within means, within balance. So you know, the whole idea of balance. Absolutely. Water is the ultimate balancer. In fact, what I would like to suggest is, it's quite ironic that the first frontier opened here in the Chamisa system, when the Dutch settled, my grandfather settled here, and he opened up that frontier with the Khoi people. Within a generation, the Khoi people no longer existed. Within a generation, they were gone. First water war was fought over here, right over here, about control of the Chamisa system. And the first environmental law came from here, the Chamisa system. And ultimately, this is where the full circle has come back here. So this is really almost the renaissance, if you like. We're being forced to revisit our fundamental assumptions. And that's why I'm so fond of the energy here, because I think it's important to do it. So when I talk about abundance, it's not about excess, it's about well-being. And how do we define well-being? That's tied up now with the values of water. How do we value water? You can't value water as 999 a cubic meter, because water has got different components to it. So there are three dominant discourses of water about value. The whiners, the weers, and the wisers. The whiners say water is not an economic resource. The weers say water is an economic resource. That's the World Bank. The whiners, water is not an economic resource. These are the human rights people. Water is a fundamental human right, so you can't value it. Okay? But then there's a third school of thought that I belong to. It's a wiser, W-I-S-E-R. Water is both a social and an economic resource. So that ultimately speaks to the balance we require now. How do we balance out social and economic? Because if we don't get those two things together, then we can't provide the infrastructure needed to bring about those very, very good, important social things. So those are important things there, okay? Then I think I just want to say that one more thing. What I didn't say earlier, I knew I had an idea and I forgot about it. What is our fundamental core problem? And I would like to just present that problem to you today to interrogate, and feel free to shoot it down if you want. I believe our core problem is what we call hydraulic density of population. If you understand that, if that is the core problem, now we work that out. Doesn't mean to say that black people are bad because they have lots of babies. Doesn't mean that at all. So we can run away with that thing very quickly. What it means is that the human population on planet Earth is outstripping its available resources. So if we understand hydraulic density of population, the number of people that have to be sustained for a given unit of water. And when we say sustained, we're not just talking about drinking water and shower water. We're talking about the people, the jobs that have to sustain those people. We talk about the agriculture, the food that those people have to eat. Drinking water is 1-2 liters a day. Food is 3,000 liters per person per day. That's the big thing. So how do we get that balance in? So I would suggest that if we understand the hydraulic density of population, there you've got a couple of variables in the equation. You've got the demand side, how people demand more water to either consume it or to borrow it or to be custodians of it or whatever, but how people need water as a survival tool on the demand side, and on the supply side, what is happening to our climate, what is happening to the environmental supplies, what is happening to the natural flows, etc. So the hydraulic density of population, if we understand that, then we suddenly go into a new space. And then we also understand the fact that water is a flux, not a stock. Now we can start doing that. In that space, we can do intellectual gymnastics, okay? And that's kind of really what I want to push. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Bodie, I'm going to pass to you.
Hi. I was supposed to be a keynote speaker, but I have to leave. I'm going to another workshop that looks after my estuary, and we know how much the nature is suffering, so I really feel that I need to go to that. My deepest apologies for that. My slides are on the computer, and they're fairly well written out, so if you want to go through them, you're welcome. But otherwise, they're also already on my website, and my link is in the program. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right, anybody else? I think you had your hand up, and then we're going to get on to the rest of the speakers.
I have one question. Is there somebody from Cape Town Water still here?
No, but they will be here tomorrow, or later on this afternoon as well.
Okay, well then...
Dave might be able to answer. It depends on the type of question.
My question is this. So at the moment, it used to be 87 liters of water per person. It's down to 50. There's talks of 25 coming. When the crisis is over, what is your expectation?
Thank you.
So Cape Town has the most remarkable thing that I think any city can boast about. There is a graph, which unfortunately I don't have here, but it is on the Cape Town website, which shows the growth of the population from about 1900 as an exponential line, as one would expect. It also shows on the same set of axes the growth of water consumption over that same period up to about 2014. In fact, now it's been extended and we all know the recent history. But at the year 2000, an interesting thing happened. Water restrictions were brought in because the Berg River Dam, often people ask, what have the authorities done about water supply for Cape Town in this situation that we find ourselves in? They built the Berg River Dam just in time. That dam has actually saved us. But at the time, year 2000, they put on water restrictions so that that dam could be completed without a problem in the supply side. Following on that, the restrictions were kept in place because of a drought in 2002-2003. The remarkable thing is that, think of the number 800. 800 megalitres a day was what it flattened off to at that time with those restrictions. That number we're all now very familiar with is more or less where we were at 2015. So something very, very remarkable happened between the year 2000 and 2015. The population continued to grow exponentially. So there's an extra million, maybe even 1.5 million extra people in Cape Town, and yet our water consumption remained at 800 megalitres a day. So what happened? I believe that there were two things that happened. There was a mindset change in the way people used water in Cape Town. Before this current drought, people have forgotten that they still had bricks in the system from the year 2000. They still have forgotten now that they planted water-wise gardening. So there were a number of changes that were built into our society in Cape Town from the year 2000 onwards. Now we've done the most, even more remarkable thing. We've shrunken our water consumption down to 550 or 525. I mean, that is truly amazing. So you ask the question, what do we expect when we get the rain? Well, I think we have a very proven track record of history of being very wise people in Cape Town, and I think the habits that we're developing now will result in a reduced water consumption for an extended period beyond this drought period. The rider to this is that the population that has arrived in Cape Town that have actually put very little water stress on our systems, those people will be economically upward moving. And so as a result of that, their water consumption will definitely go up. They'll be in houses rather than in shanties. There'll be a whole shift. So I do actually expect our water consumption to go up for that reason. But the per capita consumption, I believe, we all know what a struggle 50 litres per person per day actually is. I think it will probably go back to a more, what we will now find our new normal, somewhere around about 100, 150. And that will still be a world-shattering low figure.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Turton, I'd like to ask you to talk a little bit more about desalination. There's a lot of misconception and fake news and myths going about it. Also mention the cost. Thank you.
Thanks, yeah. Look, just very briefly, I don't want to get drawn into the whole desalination thing. That's a choice that people have to make ultimately. You've got to make a choice. Ultimately, if you want to live your life in a certain way and there's no more surface water available, you've got to do something else with it. And I think the important thing is that desalination is a technology that's available. It's getting improved by the day. There's an exponential improvement in the membranes. There's an exponential improvement in the energy consumption for membranes. And what's really interesting about it is that you get different kinds of desalination. The one kind of desalination first treats the water with chemicals, and the other kind of desalination just is almost kind of natural. It doesn't put chemicals in it. So if you go the natural route, then ultimately it comes down to the fact that your brine that you put back in the ocean is chemical free, and all you do is you're actually putting back increased nutrients and slightly elevated level of salts in the ocean. The bottom line is we now have the price for water. It's been flushed up by carte blanche, etc. 12 rand a cubic meter, 12 rand a kiloliter of water. And I know for a fact that South African desalination people can do it for less than that. This I know. So let's just talk as a ballpark number, 12 rand a kiloliter. That I think is a reasonable price. I think that's an honest price for what I'm talking about. But ultimately, the people must decide. It's not for anyone to sort of project this.
I'm going to ask Polly to come forward. I know Deirdre had one very last comment, and then Dr. Polly will be doing
I think it's more devil's advocate question. We talk about corporations and households going off the grid. But then you've got to say, what's the implications of municipalities? Where are they going to get their money from, and what are the consequences of that? So I just thought I'd put that out there. And then what I've been doing is, as people have been speaking, I've been putting points down. So please remember to make your points and put it on. I think the interesting thing for me was we spoke to a specialist on causal analysis in Australia during the week, and he said, you will never get to level 4. You'll only be able to get to level 1 and 2. So I'm really, really happy to see that we've got a lot of views coming through, a lot of paradigms, and a lot of the emotion. So if you can all just make your notes, because that's what, and I think that's the greatest thing about this topic, is there are different degrees.
Great, thank you, Deirdre. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're a little bit behind schedule. I'm going to ask Dr. Polly to speak. If you want to take responsibility for your own comfort and, leave now or come back, please feel free. Okay, thank you, Dr. Polly.
Well, thanks a lot for having me, and sorry, I had scheduled 10 to 12, so I also have a deadline, but thanks for making the arrangements. I had a privilege of more than 10 years ago of bringing Zulu to Cape Town, and I think it's very important. Water does have a message, don't forget it, and don't consider this H2O. There's nothing to see with H2O, that's a misnomer. But let's put it all to the side and look at the crisis. My world is a world where for the past 30 years I've been inspired by nature. Nature is my master. That means that nature has no unemployment and nature has no waste. So, everyone always operates on the basis of sufficiency. And I think it's a very simple principle, but that's the one that guides me. My organization has implemented more than 200 projects. We've mobilized $5 billion. We're not haysayers, we're not dreamers. We get capital to follow what we do. Why? Because we're not against anything, we're in favor of the best. It's the only reason. We operate what we think is the best for the world, not for the person who invests. We think there is also for them something that's called sufficiency. We have a lot of inspiration of a lot of great people. Time doesn't allow me to go through it. But if I can stand where I'm standing today, it's because I can stand on the shoulder of extraordinary people. I'm sometimes compared in the Huffington Post, particularly, they always refer to me as the Steve Jobs of sustainability. But I would like to remind you that the day of the elections for presidency, they thought that Donald Trump had a 2% chance of getting elected. So don't trust them. My Latin American friends call me the Che Guevara of sustainability. Yeah, that's probably a bit closer, though I don't want to die with a bullet in my head. I'm a product of an organization that is called the Club of Rome. The Club of Rome presented a book in 1972, and it basically said limits to growth. We have basically read it. It's one of the most sold non-fiction books in modern history. We just never acted on it. I have published my own book as a report to the Club of Rome now 10 years ago, and it's called The Blue Economy. I've just published another one called The Third Dimension, and ladies and gentlemen, let's get down to basics. This has to be prohibited to be flushed. One of those urinals is 2,000 liters a day in an airport. One is 2,000 liters a day. The calculation for the University of Cape Town, if all urinals would go dry, you would use the urine for, of course, obvious potassium source for your fertilizer. It would be a major savings of the purchase of fertilizers. Let's not talk about water, let's talk about the fertilizer that was wasted in the process.
How do you solve it? It's very simple. You need old inner tubes of bicycles which are heat pressed, and you make use of the physical functioning of rubber, and that rubber will be highly hydrophobic, and therefore when urine runs through it, it opens up. When the urine is over going through it, it closes down. No odor whatsoever. No odor. That would generate 200 jobs immediately in Cape Town if you decide to do it. So what are you waiting for? What are you sitting here for? And this is the kind of things that we look at. Now here you see our school systems. We have installed these school systems in Sweden. They've now been formally approved in Sweden for hygiene reasons. Because yes, people want to flush. So we have a 300 milliliter flush per solids. 300 milliliter flush. That goes through this vortex, and this vortex allows us to separate solids from liquids. A school with 250 kids will give us exactly 200 kilograms of dry base a year. Extraordinary fertilizer. But this is what's behind it. If you do the urinals and if you do the schools, that is the system dynamics you trigger. What we're in need of is the system dynamics. We need to know there are a couple of things when you trigger it, it can dramatically change everything else. So here is what's behind some of the work we do. Desalination. I'm sorry. I love desalination. I know the interests of General Electric and Siemens. I have been to the desalination water center in Singapore. I know all the research. My network is 3,000 people. I know what's going on. It's not the cheapest, not the best. Here we have a natural desalination system which does not need membranes. It's not the investment what costs money with desalination. The cost is the membranes you have to continue to replace. And here is what we've done. Simple vortex inside here. Depending on the structure of the water, you will have 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 of these vortices, and you will have clean water. Period. Let's embrace innovation. Let's not repeat what the errors are of the past. Thank you. Move on. This is what we get from our vortex systems. The vortex is the way water naturally moves. Don't change the physics of water with force, because then you will need a lot of pressure and a lot of energy. If you just take the time to see how water really works, then we will be able to move from that water to that water basically by using vortex only. And its technology is open source available. We're 3,000 scientists, but we're also 1,000 entrepreneurs. We're only going for transformation that is disruptive. We love disruption. Anything that is doing better on the fringes with us is rejected. Because doing less bad is not good. We need to do more good. And that's the big shift that we're seeing in the ethics. But we have surprising results, but positive results. Again, I repeat, we're never against anything. We're always in favor of better. Much better indeed. So, here are the horrible cruise ships that also arrived in Cape Town. As you may know, these cruise ships have excluded themselves from the Paris Agreement. Why? Because they're so goddamn polluting, and they have such great lobbyists that they were able in Paris 2 years ago to be excluded from the agreement. You can see why. Just look at what's coming out of there. So, what did I do? We raised $20 million and we created the first ship that has already gone around the world once, faster than the plane that went around the world with a lot of PR, because we don't spend money on PR, we spend money on doing things. And so here is what we've done. This is the boat when it left in Lorient. It's a 500 square meter solar panel which allows us to convert seawater into hydrogen, and that we use as a power source for the boat, and we all know what is the byproduct. It's called drinking water. We have 70 people on the boat, we've gone around the world, we're doing our second tour of the world right now. We're bringing to every town and community that is interested in the following message. Do you have seawater? Do you have sun? Well, then you have power and drinking water, period. You don't have to make a big debate. Don't mess around. But if you're stuck and there is not enough sun and you seem to have a difficulty getting your seawater because the pipe is broke, well, get a kite. I mean, our kites function perfectly. you put them in the air for 300 meters height, they will start making a natural 8. That's the dynamics that's fluid dynamics. And thanks to that, we're charging our batteries. Ladies and gentlemen, the boat went around the world faster than Mr. Picard with his plane. That is the message we have for, don't you remember, the hare and the tortoise. So, what else have we done? We've gone for communities where there was no drinking water at all. 0. We started doing something very simple, regenerated forest. I was actually invited to Cape Town 15 years ago in order to discuss about the elimination of the non-native species, eucalyptus. If you want water, get rid of eucalyptus now! Very simple, get rid of it! I mean, they suck the water out of your bottom and then you're worried about the crisis. Eucalyptus is your problem, ladies and gentlemen. It is non-native, it shouldn't be there, get rid of it. And don't get romantic about the beautiful tree that gives you a bit of shade. What we've done, ladies and gentlemen, in this part of Colombia, where there was no water anymore, we started regenerating water by having native plants come back. We have the native plants come back, dominating with pioneer species first, please. This is not a monoculture. Always in nature there is a pioneer species. Once you have the pioneers invading, everyone else will follow. Bottom line of our forest that we have today, this is a 30-year project. Don't think short term, this is long term. But you have to have an industry. I'm not going to go into details of the industry, but thanks to the forests, we have changed the dynamics of the temperature difference between soil and rain. As long as your rain is warmer than your soil, you're fine. As soon as your soil is warmer than your rain, you even have rain, it's not going to get into your ground. It's basic physics. I mean, don't ask anyone to make for you a genetically modified tree that will withstand the heat. Learn how nature works. And nature will tell you that you should not have a frying pan and pour oil on it. That's basically what we do. What have we done concretely? The community has 3 liters of free drinking water a day. 3 liters. Perfectly feasible. And on top of that, every child, apart from the 3 liters they can get every day, every child at the age of 6 gets a bicycle for free. What do you get when children have 3 liters of drinking water a day and a bicycle riding from age 6? Ladies and gentlemen, the message is very clear. We had to close our hospital for lack of patients. That is sustainable development. I mean, why do you want to fill up the pharmaceutical companies' budgets? Let's go to South Australia, along the coast. Who has been to Port Augusta? I like people talking about Perth, but that's where the rich people live. Let's go to Port Augusta. That's where all the closed mines are. That's where the communities have gone from 150,000 to 17,000 because the mine is closed down and they're only stuck with pollution and degraded land. Well, this is what we started with, a greenhouse. A greenhouse that operates on a system that was developed by Mr. Charlie Patton, because we don't like, and I appreciate it was said before, that if you're having meat, you consume 15,000 liters of water per kilogram of meat. If you're consuming chocolate, ladies and gentlemen, then you're consuming 17,500 liters of water per kilogram of chocolate. That means our food system is the guzzler, not your swimming pool, not your toilet, it's your food system. And therefore we decided about 8 years ago to change the food system. My scientists got onto it, the capital got behind it, and normally tomatoes consume 210 liters of water for 1 kilogram of tomatoes. Ladies and gentlemen, with this ingenious system, which is very simply getting cold water from the ocean. Now you have the cold Benguela current. You haven't. We have ice cold water coming from the ocean. It is channeled through the soil and put back into the ocean. The only thing we use is the coldness. Thanks to the coldness, we have a lowering of the dew point. We have water generating to the point, ladies and gentlemen, that here you see our $220 million investment. I want you to think big, ladies and gentlemen. I do not only want you to think about urinals and inner tubes of bicycles. I want you to think big. And you have to provide food for your 4 million people. And it's about time you start thinking about food that is generated with your cold water. Ladies and gentlemen, this is implemented. This is done. We're producing 17,000 tons of tomatoes. And for every kilogram of tomatoes, we're producing 25 liters of drinking water. That is the revolution. That's what the city needs to realize. It's not a mix of 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, it's disruptive innovations that will basically make it unnecessary to have a backup of reverse osmosis. This system is fully self-sufficient. Now, I love to hear this talk about the bubble of the land price. Ladies and gentlemen, how much is a piece of land worth that has no water and nothing grows in it? Nothing. What is the land price of a piece? What is the price of a piece of land when you have water, you have your own power, and you generate jobs and revenue? Well, ladies and gentlemen, in Port Augusta, Australia, the land value went up factor 60. With factor 60 going up, and it's not the speculation of real estate downtown, the business center. It is not a new hotel that is going to violate, again, the parks, laws and limitations. It is simply producing food. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the logic we apply. Over a year, the first year of production, we had a difference in water consumption of 3 million tons. Tomatoes only, ladies and gentlemen. Do you want to convert the garden route of South Africa into just a place where people drive along the route? Or are you going to start producing things, generate jobs, so that you do not have 50% of your young people unemployed? That is what we stand for. A great initiative that I've promoted for around 10 years unsuccessfully in South Africa. I'm just a visitor, I don't live here. It is by coincidence that I'm visiting my family here that I can join you today. But basically, South Africa sticks to producing water not only with GMO eucalyptus trees which drain all your soils to death. On top of that, your sappies and your mondis, which you so much appreciate, and probably some of you have invested money in, are very keen on continuing producing something that is outdated. We have initiated with old mine waste, the dust, and if you do not know about dust, go to the vials, I've been there. You are securing generations of asthma and respiratory diseases, and you know it. Go to Johannesburg, and all the old tailing dams are ensuring that people, particularly the children, will suffer forever. Now, there is only one thing you should do. Get the dust out of the air and turn it into paper. We're the largest producers in the world of stone paper. We take crushed rocks that normally cause massive air pollution, these particles that are solid and mineral that stick into your lungs for the rest of your life, we take it and turn it into paper. All of this can be produced right here. It is unacceptable that South Africa, with the billions of tons of tailing dams wastes, that you are not proceeding with the production of paper that does not need any water. You have no water, you can make paper. Today, you need 60,000 tons of water for 1 ton of paper. That is the standard. Ladies and gentlemen, are you in shortage of water, or are you going to be disruptive and change the model and start cleaning out the air of your mining areas and start converting that? Here is the factory in China. We're now at 1 million ton production. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a great little idea that is somewhere in a laboratory and where people debate. We have invested by today more than $1 billion in this, and we are producing 1 million tons. China has decided it will go for 25% of all paper in China will be water-free paper. You recycle it, you don't need water. Ladies and gentlemen, it can be recycled forever. This is what we need. But my last example, and one of the reasons why I'm here, is because I'm going to Paternoster, where we have a large piece of our laboratory projects. Inspired by Science magazine, that indicated the great opportunities with seaweed. I do not know if you are aware, but South Africa and Namibia, along with thanks to the Benguela Current, is one of the greatest seaweed farming regions of the world. You are with Argentina, with Philippines, with Chile. You're number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the world. And what do? Nothing. You look at it. You study it. You get it at your labs. And I go to Stellenbosch, I go to UCT. They all know about it and they all celebrate it. But when are you translating it into jobs, ladies and gentlemen? When? I mean, this is annoying. We've offered a lot of opportunities there. This is Paternoster. This is our trial unit. Yes, in collaboration with UCT. This is our trial unit where we're able to produce 1,000 tons of seaweed per year thanks to the incredible nutritious waters that come from Antarctica. Incredibly nutritious. It's so nutritious, it's embarrassing you don't do anything with it. And so 1,000 tons of seaweed, ladies and gentlemen, is 500 tons per hectare, 500 tons of drinking water. You realize that? Should I repeat? 1,000 tons of seaweeds is 500 tons of drinking water per hectare, coming straight out of your sea. To do what? Well, to produce gas. Because seaweed, and we have in Atlantis the trial stations. Atlantis has these huge gas units there as a backup for when your nuclear isn't working anymore. And we have started to produce our own gas from the seaweeds in Atlantis. Low key, we don't do advertising, we don't want to talk about it. We're just so focused on getting results because it's urgent. We gotta change things around. And so the urgency is the following, that today, this country, South Africa, is flirting with shale gas. You want to sacrifice your Karoo for shale gas. These people who do that should all be put in jail. At least for one night. At least for one night. And if they don't repent, 2 nights. But it is absolutely insane that when you're the country that can be the net producer of natural gas from seaweed, number 1 and number 2 in the world, that you're prepared to go for nuclear and that you're prepared to go for shale gas. The only explanation is corruption. No other. So stand up and go against it, not by criticizing them, by getting an alternative. And the alternative is in the Cape Town. Now look at the cost of shale gas in the Karoo. 5.2, I mean, this is, if you would turn that into equivalents in barrels of petroleum, you talk about approximately $48 a barrel. So the economists will say, well, that's cheaper than the world market price for petroleum today, which is around 60. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the true cost is really about 75 because there's a lot of costs that are not being calculated. But this is the cost of seaweed. Now, if you only calculate the seaweed, we're looking at about $14 a barrel of petroleum equivalent. But if you include your 2% solids, which can be converted and is converted into fertilizer, then you have nitrogen and phosphorus-rich fertilizer, which today South Africa is importing massively. And therefore, you have the opportunity to increase your costs to basically $8 a barrel.
And it's organic.
And it's totally organic, it's from your seaweeds, and you're only recycling nutrition that comes from Antarctica, which today you don't use. So there is no... Now, we are able to do this. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, I'll give you a few numbers. 1,000 tons of seaweed per hectare per year gives you 585 cubic meters of natural gas a day. Forever. Okay? You can't exhaust it because as long as you have sun and currents from Antarctica, it works. You know, why aren't we ready to embrace nature? The things that work, that have been around for 1 billion years. Why do you want to go for reverse osmosis that is so expensive, that is getting you an amount of membranes which no one will ever take back from you, and they will suggest you shred them and put them in a landfill, as is done just about all around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, these are just a few of my proposals. I'm a father of 6 children. I have a home in Cape Town where we come with our family. Our home consumes 0 water and 0 electricity. We have all the water and no boreholes. We have prohibited the boreholes. We only do freshwater collection from the rain. We have today 185,000 liters of water reserve thanks to the rainfall of last year. Ladies and gentlemen, it's easy. But what I would like to contribute to your debate here, don't get too much lost in the debate about the cost of water and the cost of reverse osmosis and the cost of this. Get your mindset focused on the industrial, economic transformation that Cape Town can go through with proven and existing technologies. And if you do, yes, you will have an abundance of water. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I take a quick 3 questions? Is that all right? Yeah? Lady at the back?
Can you speak to the impact of the practices associated with seaweed farming on the marine ecosystem and positive negative?
Seaweed farming has an incredible opportunity because you have been destroying your kelp forests. I mean, we're basically regenerating your kelp forests. And when you have 1,000 tons harvested a year, you will always have 500 tons reintroduced. So there is no negative on the production side. The positive is that once you have the seaweed forest in again, you will get your abalones back, which have been poached to death. You have your oysters back, where you're now importing your larvae from Japan. You will have your fishes back. You will have your sea otters back. You will have all of it back. We made a calculation that South Africa, with only about 3,000 square kilometers of seaweed farming, 3,000 square kilometers. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not even 0.5% of your territorial waters. You're self-sufficient in all energy sources for the whole nation. And you will have generated 3.2 million jobs. By the way, 3.2 million jobs. If you want to go hand labor, if you want to automate, it will only be about 500,000 jobs.
Thank you. All right. Any last 2? Or are we pretty much here?
It's not working.
It's not working. Mr. Pauly, Dr. Pauly, Gunther, that was an absolutely incredible talk. I think that you breathed some inspiration and some light into this audience, which was needed. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful. I'm sure many of the other people here are extremely grateful, especially that note that you made on the indigenous, the alien vegetation, the eucalyptus trees. I personally had a clash with people where I live, with the community, trying to pull them down, but a lot of the people are just stubborn and don't see the...
Go at night, it's stealth.
Thank you.
One last question, and then
Thank you very much. My question is just, where is the resistance when this is so obviously a solution that needs to be taken, to South Africa? Where's the resistance coming from?
Until now, we had an extraordinary resistance in Pretoria for reasons you can imagine. That's why I never push. When things don't work, I don't push, I go around, I go somewhere else. Very simple. I'm not a missionary for this. Second, there's a lot of ignorance. I would like to know from you, who knew about the seaweed? Who knew about the stone paper? Who knew about... very often we have ignorance. Because on the internet there is so much data, but zero wisdom. And so what we need is a bit of the wisdom back. Third, there is what we call institutional technical lock-ins. You cannot imagine the lobby of the reverse osmosis desalination lobby. They see $1 billion turning in front of their eyes, and they're going to go for it. And they're going to convince the people that they need to convince and do what they need to do to make certain that it will be a contract. Unfortunately, what South Africa, and particularly the Western Cape, should be doing, and Mr. Winder knows it, and Zilla knows it, because I've told them already, but I don't repeat myself 2 times. Either they do or they don't do. But we know that the tomato farming one can do along the coast, with all the veggie farming along the coast, will make this really a self-sufficient place with drinking water. I've invited them to come to Australia to see what has been done in Port Augusta. We haven't seen anyone yet. Of course, people prefer to go to Sydney, to Melbourne, to Brisbane, and to Perth. You don't go to a hole where you see the same disaster that your own mining companies have been creating for decades and for centuries. So that is the reality. So for me, the key is, and that's why I take time with my family. I'm very seldom with my family. I take time to be with you because we need to be, and that's the fifth one that's missing, passion. I mean, we need to get passionate about this. This is not about mathematics and calculations and costs. This is about, I mean, I can do the costs on the back of every envelope. It's done deal. But what we need is to get more passionate about the opportunities that are there, because what we've lost is the passion, the motivation, the opportunity to see that we can change the world. Wow, we can do it. And why can we do it? Because a few people decided to do it. You know, and that's what we're missing most of all. Too much calculus, too much philosophy, not enough heart and soul.
Doctor, at Port Augusta you mentioned the use of cold water to bring
Yes.
the temperature down. I don't quite understand that.
Do I have time?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's a very simple principle. It was developed. I'll show it to you. This is the principle. You take cold water, which basically in South Africa you can take from 1 meter down. I mean, it's cold enough. The water goes through your soil, through the land, and cools down the land. Since the land is colder, your plants will change the dew point. The dew point is the moment that you start having condensation on your plants. So basically you do a drip irrigation by controlling the coldness of your water that goes through the soil. And in this way, the hotter it gets, the more drip you get. That means you have massive, particularly when you have your shortage of water, then you have massive production of dew water through the system. You create over it basically a cardboard structure, cheap. There are winds here, it can blow away. If it's cardboard, you don't mind. If it's one of these expensive glass and special reflective systems, you know, then it's going to be too expensive. That's why people don't invest in greenhouses, because the risk is too high. But we do this in cardboard. This is cardboard structures. It works. We've done it in Tenerife, we've done it in Oman, we've done it in Port Augusta. And Port Augusta is the one that went big scale. And you know, we have now the agreement with Coles in Australia, whereby the 17,000 tons of tomatoes are bought by one company, everything is organic, and we're half price of the chemical tomatoes that they're having today. We're changing the market to organic. But we don't stand there with the flag, we're organic. We're standing there with, we got quality, and it's cheaper, and the investor gets a times 60 on the land that they purchased. And that makes move the capital. We have to have a business model that moves capital. But it means who's today the owner of all that land where nothing grows? Well, let's make certain that we lock in that land and make certain that this is not for a couple of rich people, as usual. Let's make certain this is for everyone else.
Excellent.
And so that is what we've done in Port Augusta. So the simple logic is the same as we used for the regeneration of the forest. It's temperature difference. Water reflects always on one simple thing, delta T. Engineers, delta T, once you manage delta T, you manage water. And once you see how you can apply that to a regeneration of a forest, or you can apply that to higher rainfall. We have increased rainfall in regions by managing delta T. We're not the rainfall dancers. We're not the Manitus. But we have succeeded in getting 10% more rainfall by managing delta T, soil versus rainwater temperature.
But you can do the dance as well.
Oh, well, the dance we will leave that to our wonderful artists who are here. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Capetonians are by their nature very polite people. So we want you to also feel free to walk in and out. Okay? Let's be respectful of the people who are presenting, but at the same time, you know, look after your own comfort. All right, I'm going to hand over to you guys, and I'm going to get your...